So I'm very happy that today we have Sri KV Dhananjay among us. Thank you very much, sir. Please join me in a round of applause. I'll briefly introduce him, though I think the name is quite known to many of you. Sri KV Dhananjay is a practicing lawyer, practicing advocate at the Supreme Court of India, at Karnataka High Court, and he practices at various courts and tribunals in the country. He's a very multifaceted personality, and I'm very privileged that I got to sort of meet him and work with him for a brief while. Within the law, it's very difficult to box him into one thing, because he really has expertise on several aspects of law, be it constitutional law, the company's law, and he engages himself in a variety of issues, particularly including the public interest sort of cases. He is also a very prolific writer. So he's a public intellectual, and he writes very often in print media. He gets quoted several times in electronic media. He has a position and view on a range of issues that today shape public discourse in our country. For last few years, he has been particularly taking keen interest on public health issues. And one such thing has been tobacco control, of course, because that's where I have personally sort of known him and his work. So he has been engaging in arguing several public interest and other litigations related to tobacco in India with quite some success. And with that, I think I will rather give floor to him and have more time to sort of hear from him. Thank you very much again for accepting our invite. And I think today we are also video shooting the oration. So we'll be sort of relaying it to the other colleagues who could not come here, and also a larger network. We have a Zoom channel and a YouTube channel. So they are the one who would be joining us. Depending on the time, what we are planning to do is that we'll rather let him talk without interruption. I'm sure you all will be very... I've been very fan of sort of the way he talks and the kind of commitment and convictions that he has brought to the field of public health. So I have a proposal that let's have the oration first, and then towards the end we'll have time for the question and answers and for the comments. And similarly, though we have some audio-visual arrangement, I'll try to moderate towards the end of the session if we can also take in some of the comments or the questions from the friends who have joined and are joining our sort of online platform. So yeah, I think they are just figuring out taking the slides. Yeah. So we have this computer connected? Yeah. Yeah. So I think while he has several sort of experiences, what we agreed is that for many of us, some of us have engaged in sort of legal strategies and many others not. So he has kindly consented that he will give us sort of a broad overview of sort of legal and constitutional perspectives on public health in India, of course, while also sharing his personal experiences of engaging in some of these litigations. So I welcome you. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. And to begin with, my deep respects to Dr. Devdasan and Dr. Upendra Bojani. They are the public face of this wonderful organization, and there is Dr. Vishal Rao here among the audience, and any credit if you would like to give to me at the end of the program, you should know that all of that credit should ideally go to him, because I didn't know much about, honestly, I knew nothing about tobacco. 2 years ago, when we met, I had thought that I was reasonably well informed. I used to write large columns in newspapers. I used to comment on a lot of matters of public interest, and I had considered myself well informed. It's only when I met with him 2 years ago I realized how much ignorant I was about tobacco and tobacco control. And that is why I always make it a point to remind people that if, when I say people, I mean the government, I mean the courts, that if they ever assume that they know much about it, the truth is they don't know practically nothing. So what is it that we need to do? Because if you start, as a lawyer who considers himself quite successful in courts, getting to know about tobacco also gives you a sense of uneasiness, which is, what is law about? What on earth are we doing, letting this toxic substance control our population? And if 2 minutes have passed since I started talking to you, 5 persons are already dead from tobacco. We lose 5 persons for every 2 minutes, and we lose roughly 13.5 lakhs annually. Now that's according to the WHO, and I honestly dispute it, because the WHO and the government of India say around 30% of our adult population is hooked on to tobacco. But then I wanted to just check how accurate this is. So when I did visit a couple of villages in Mandya for a different purpose, I went into 2 different villages. Those villages were not really very vast. I happened to talk to around 200 different people there. And what I saw was almost 90% of men consume tobacco and nearly 70% of women consume tobacco. So on an average, it's about, 90 plus 70 divided by 2 is 80%. But then the government of India says, okay, 30% only, is addicted to tobacco. But for those numbers, they say 13.5 lakh deaths happen annually. And in this, when this is a scenario, I start wondering, what good are we? What good am I a lawyer as? And what good are our courts? What good is our government? When we witness this amount of misery, killings, what's the law good for anyway? So that will be the focus of my talk in terms of, what we need to do going forward. So prior to that, I thought we could just brush up on the various public health laws that we have in our country. You're seeing that Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissues Act of 1994. Obviously, I didn't want to speak. I also thought slides might slightly keep you interested and not let you doze off. So that's a statute which most of you might be familiar with. You are generally informed about it when some VIP has a problem with his organ and then went outside the queue and then took some preferential treatment and got an organ. The problem with this statute, however, is, you see, this is a subject not for the central government or for the parliament to make, but for our states. Unfortunately, a large number of states in India are yet to get into this law. Now, I do not know if Karnataka has adopted it, but when this law was initially framed, it was framed because the state of Himachal Pradesh, the state of Goa is a state, and another one, they had requested the parliament that please come out with a law like this because we need a law, and they were unable to form one on their own. So states will come under this law if they opt for it. And once you opt, you don't have the option of walking out. So I do not know if all the states in the country have gone into this, but this is the national law that we have on transplantation. And then we have the Mental Health Act. Again, I just want to give a brief overview. The problem with our Mental Health Act, as you can see, is it's like a 19th century kind of law. It actually keeps out of people that are considered mentally retarded, which means if a person has no prospect of being cured of his mental retardation, then you call him as mentally retarded. He's kept out of this act. This act only deals with people who at some point of time were not retarded, but then who fall into mental illness, and what kind of confinement they can be subject to, what kind of confiscation of property they can be subject to, so on and so forth, are all the subject of this. A highly unsatisfactory law, and it generally tells us that we haven't evolved much in dealing with mental illness, because again, the very term mental illness is not defined. It's left to consensus among medical professionals. So this is an area that we are badly lacking in. And The Drugs and Magic Remedies Objectionable Advertisements Act of 1954. Well, anytime you turn on your cable TV or you're watching something other than Doordarshan, you will be bombarded with lots of advertisements which run foul of this statute. So this statute is observed more in its violation than anything else. I mean, you can see, look at point 2. Social morality by prohibiting public advertisements for sexual impotency, menstrual disorders and like. Well, who hasn't seen an ad in the last 1 week? Please tell me. Raise your hands. Well, this is a 1954 statute. They never wanted these kinds of advertisements, but I'm sure almost all of you would have seen something or the other in the last week or fortnight. And the Insecticides Act of 1968. So this essentially tries to control our insecticide use. It comes out with a list of prohibited insecticides which can never be used on the field, and whatever is commercially marketed must come with warnings. There's a textual warning and then there is a color-coded warning that will have to be put on the insecticides. And the Poisons Act of 1919. Now this is an interesting law. According to this, substances that are deemed to be a poison cannot be freely marketed to the public. And if anybody wants to distribute it to the public, he will have to obtain a license. Now, a large number of substances that form part of the schedule to this are not as dangerous as tobacco, by the way. Nicotine. And incidentally, nicotine is now a subject of Poisons Act in 2 territories. The Union Territory of Chandigarh and the state of Punjab. And very shortly we expect a South Indian state also to get onto this bandwagon. And this is the Food Safety and Standards Act of 2006. This is it's not one of the most voluminous, it's the most voluminous health legislation we have in this country, and most people haven't read it fully, and I'm one of them. And I don't know of anybody who's read the whole statute in entirety. And for your information, we are governed by the laws. However, if our laws were carefully implemented, you would never come across anything like a chewing tobacco anywhere outside on the road, because chewing tobacco is prohibited already under this law. But then it's all very unfortunate. We have to fight it out, and we are already fighting it out in a couple of courts. So we look forward to a blanket ban and clamp down on chewing tobacco. And Air Pollution Act 1981. You would certainly see it in terms of breach, because under this law, the Government of India has published the permissible limits for particulate matter pollution. For 2.5, we've published certain limits, but then almost all of our cities exceed it by 500, 600%. So, I mean, it's going to be a very depressing number. So I thought I'll not put that slide. So let me not drive you all into depression, because there's a lot I will be telling you about tobacco and therefore creating a mild depression. I'm sure anybody that's not going to be depressed after hearing a great deal about tobacco will have to get himself checked. And the Environment Protection Act of 1986. You see, this is again, nobody should think environment means forests. No. This is a human-centric environment we are talking about under this statute. It is quite voluminous and it's also very powerful if implemented. If not implemented, of course, it's of no use. And for the forests, again, it's only in the last 2-3 decades we have come to see increasing interdependence between different species. So, Forest Conservation Act is also there in our country. Wildlife Protection Act is there. And all of these will tell us that India is the one country in the world that has the finest laws possible. If anyone is going to ask for laws to regulate anything, we already have that in India. And I don't think any other country of the world has such beautiful laws as we have. The problem is implementation. And, proliferation of tobacco tells us everything about our state of public health. Because quite honestly, I don't think the courts have a right to say that they've been efficient. The legal profession has any moral right to say that they've done much. When we have this amount of proliferation of tobacco in the society, then what are we really doing? So 42.4% of all male adults in India are already hooked on to tobacco. I mean, that's a huge number. When I was giving you the number earlier, that's overall. Males plus females. But when you take males alone, which anyway are the majority here as well, kindly see that we are doing very badly. Okay, and the thing is, the government likes to say that, oh, a new survey has come out and that survey shows so much of reduction. Well, this is a reduction. It's not, is it really something to be cheerful about? Well, of course, there is a reduction, but then nobody should be celebrating this. 28.6% of the adult population is still such a big number. We are such a large country, we are such a, populous country. We should be worried about almost 30%. Again, 30.46% to 28.6%. It's not really a reason to celebrate at all. But unfortunately, our governments celebrated this a great deal. And I keep telling them that, why don't you be a bit greedy? Why don't you want to celebrate more? Prohibit it tomorrow. If you prohibit it tomorrow, you could celebrate even more. And there will be real celebration among the people. And however, the interesting thing is, the percentage of non-smokers who consider themselves exposed to second-hand smoke, this is all self-reported. This is not like they take the body fluid and then test for nicotine, or it's not that. It's self-reporting, but still, for some reason, the non-smokers have become more aware of the dangers of tobacco, and they seem to be doing many things to protect themselves from exposure to second-hand tobacco smoke. So it was 52.3% earlier that felt that they were exposed. Now that number has come down to 38.7%, and we are doing something in that regard, and we want to see that number come down even more. And again, this is very bad. Pregnant women, we have 7.5% of all of our current pregnant women consume tobacco. Now that's horrible. And again, it's addictive. I'm sure most people don't know this. I can tell you our judges don't know this. They just don't know that this is why our laws about tobacco are they're considered very strict by some, because it's because of this factor. It is so addictive. The United States National Institute of Drug Abuse says, for every 100 persons that start today that want to quit, at the end of a year, only 6% are successful, which means the addictive potential of nicotine, tobacco, is far higher than all the other drugs, the street drugs, the opium, cocaine, heroin, cannabis, alcohol. Well, you can name any other drug. I'm sure nicotine, the addictive potential of nicotine is much, much higher than that. And this is exactly why our laws, some people don't understand why are all these tobacco control laws so hardline like. It's because of that. But the problem is we don't articulate it. We don't articulate it well enough. And okay, there's a I'm sorry for the problem with the slide. This is our primary, we call it as COTPA. It's the Cigarettes and Other Tobacco Products Prohibition of Advertisement and Regulation of Trade and Commerce Production, Supply and Distribution Act of 2003. This is our principal tobacco control statute in India, and it's done a great deal of good relative to other statutes. And you can see, again, it prohibits sale of tobacco products to minors and all that. Now, pictorial warning, again, that's a subject on which I'm well suited to talk, but I won't be saying much about it anyway today, because we have practically won the battle on that. We now have 85%. On tobacco packs, you will see 85% pictorial warning on both sides. Now, that was the law from 2016, April 1. But then the tobacco companies, very unhappy with that, because, you see, it brings down their sales volume, and then it makes people become aware. And it also starts letting others see, oh God, is it this bad? Because what is there in that pictorial warning is you have a rotting organ, or you have a tumor, or you have someone screaming. You have that picture. It's all real pictures, by the way, and the reality is much worse than that. So when smokers are exposed to this on a daily basis, and when tobacco consumers are exposed to these pictorial warnings on a daily basis, they are bound to start, make efforts to quit that product, and that's what the government wanted. So we have 85% on both sides, and I'm happy to tell you that by virtue of this, India now occupies a third position in the world. Earlier, prior to 2016, from 2009, 31st of May to 31st of March 2016, that's for almost 5 years, we had 40% on one side only. And I can tell you, with 40% on one side, we were ranked at number 136 in the world. And it's a good thing that Mr. Modi said, no, this is not to be tolerated. What we will do is, we will jump. And this was the biggest leap seen anywhere in the world. There is no country of the world that sprang from 40% on one side to 85% on both sides. And Mr. Modi did that. And I think we could be proud of that. And now, what has this done? This says, first, again, this is easy to monitor. Compliance with this is easy to monitor. And so many public surveys have shown that tobacco companies are almost 95%, whatever samples they take for testing, 95% of tobacco packets are already complying with this. And you can see the tobacco companies did everything that they wanted to prevent this. And I'm happy to tell you that today is the 1st of September. And from today, it's mandatory for the tobacco companies to have new set of images. Now, these new set of images are more scary than the old set of images, and the tobacco companies did everything they possibly could to stall this, and I am happy to tell you they lost it yesterday at the Karnataka High Court. And I was involved in an indirect way in that matter. And in the first set of images, of course, we were right in the action, in the thick and thin of action. So, effective today, you will see new set of images. Now, the impact of this, it's all here. 61.9% of smokers were contemplating quitting after the 85% came in, versus only 38% under the old 40%. So going forward, I'm sure in 2020, we will have a much bigger number. Now, not all of them will be successful in quitting, but then the effort is what matters. Now you have so many more people making the effort, and sheer law of statistics is you will have more number of people eventually quitting because of more people making an effort to quit. Okay, now this is the essential question, I think. Well, I will put back that slide because my friend wanted to take a photograph or something of that, so I'll keep it. So, why do we tolerate tobacco today? First of all, this is the most important question we should all be asking ourselves. What's the use of human language? What's the use of human sensitivity? When we see so much of suffering around us and yet we tolerate, what's the real reason? Well, in the last 2 years, I've discovered that there is no real reason because no one has been able to articulate. No one has ever been able to articulate why we still keep tobacco in our midst. So most likely, no one has been asking, why have we not prohibited this yet so far? In a loud way, I'm sure people have conferences in which it's all spoken, but not enough people are asking, why haven't we prohibited already? And I think that's what is required. And if there is one agenda that I wanted to bring to today's discussion, which is, I think we have to start asking that question in all earnestness now. Because honestly, there is nobody to articulate any answer at all. There is no answer. Nobody knows the real reason. And again, you see, in 1604, King James I of England said all bad things about tobacco. And now you have intellectuals saying, my God, this monarch knew in the early 17th century what tobacco does. Why didn't he do more? Well, the fact of the matter is this. What are we doing today? It's easy to judge. It's easy to go back in time and lay the blame on someone not doing this or that. Well, what honestly are we doing today? But the problem is this. Well, in 1604, he knew as a monarch that it was really very bad. He did take a couple of tobacco control measures, but even in early 1900, it was not so widespread. Something happened. Probably it's an industrial revolution coming to the fore, and then, factories being set up in large scale and so on and so forth in the later 20th century. So, I didn't have any assistance of a doctor in pulling these things out, because I felt I can't be effective as a lawyer in a courtroom if all that I will do is pick up the law book and then go up before the court. It's necessary to also, get to know these things, start reading these things. And then, of course, when I started reading medical literature almost 2 years ago, I was not really understanding much. But then I didn't give up. I kept reading, and I started subscribing to all kinds of journals, Science, Nature. And when I was getting these magazines 2 years ago, I would finish off an entire issue in 15-20 minutes. Now, I realized that it takes 4.5 hours to finish one issue. So for the last 2 months, 3 months, I haven't even opened the issue covers. All I wanted to tell with the help of this is that no amount of knowledge, no knowledge is inaccessible to anybody in this day and age. Nobody can give an excuse and say that, oh, this is science, I can't understand. And neither can doctors give an excuse and say, oh, this is law, I can't understand. What is it? It's all the same. It's just a stream of knowledge. And again, to say, can you see that? There were only 140 cases of lung cancer in 1900, documented cases. Now we'll come to say, and this is the problem. The tobacco industry started realizing when mid-50s that, oh God, it's so bad. And this year we will be losing 60 lakh deaths. We'll be losing 60 lakh persons. Is it possible for any of you to just imagine, visualize what it means to see 60 lakh persons? Let's be a global citizen for a moment. 60 lakh persons just dying, and then people surrounding them. Is it even possible for us to imagine that, visualize it? Because I don't think meaningful tobacco control is possible if we don't do a variation of that. Okay, if somebody says 60 lakh is overwhelming, okay, let's just take 5 that we lose every 2 minutes. Can you just imagine what it means? What kind of pain they'll be undergoing? Maybe I'll just stay aloof for a minute. We can visualize what it means to lose 5 individuals with their family members surrounding them, the kind of pain, suffering, the misery that the victim would have felt in not being able to quit. It's horrible. And, well, we can do that afterwards. We can take more time to grieve. So, at the end of the day, what is this about? Money? Okay. How much money is a victim giving to a tobacco company? Even fortunately, the science, the doctors who work in tobacco control have done such stellar work. Even that's available as a data. So, a tobacco victim generates $10,000 to a tobacco company. Now that's actually the price of a human being, effectively. The worth of a human being now can be measured. That's a profit a person addicted to tobacco will generate to the tobacco companies throughout his lifetime. This is not a big number. Anyway, we are a $2 trillion economy, and then the America is about $24 trillion economy, and then look at it. We've already put a label on we've put a money value on the worth of a human life. It's just this. And this is what we are saying, oh God, it's such big money. How can we afford to lose it? Let's keep tobacco in our midst. That's all. That's the price of a human being. And anybody who says that human life is immeasurable, you should send them to me, because I'll give them the slide and tell them, who told you human life is immeasurable? Human life has already been quantified. This is it. The society has accepted that, yes, this is a fair value on the human life. Okay, and this is important. You see, 1900 to 2000, we lost 10 crore persons to tobacco. 2000 to 2100, we will be losing 10 times at 100 crore persons to tobacco. Now, this is all those who actually consume it, or those who are immediately exposed, right? Second-hand smoke. What about the other factor? At this point of time, there is not even an agency in the world, like International Association for Research on Cancer is a WHO body that will look at what substances must be declared to be carcinogenic or cancer-causing. But there is no body in the world at this point of time that will look at what substance does not merely cause cancer in a human being, but will also create genetic damage for that person's offspring. You don't even have a research body, which means it's a threat we are not even prepared to acknowledge. So where is the question of even combating it? And tobacco is already faring so well on that threat. Now research is steadily accumulating to show, results are steadily accumulating to show that it causes massive genetic damage, not just to the person who consumes it, but then to the offspring. Now that's very concerning. That's also the reason why we can't afford to say that, well, whoever is doing it deserves to be punished. But there are people who are not doing it. If the offspring, what theory can we possibly put forth to say that the offspring deserves to be punished? Not at all. And this is simplification of that. Many things are there. And by the way, almost all of these things form part of our pleading in the courts, for your information. Almost everything that I've said about tobacco forms part of our pleading to the courts. We wanted the courts to know what they are dealing with. Okay, we just discussed it, 100 crore deaths versus 10 crore deaths. Now, this is a topic on which I am probably a bit better suited than the previous slides to talk about. What are the courts going to do about tobacco, and what can they possibly do? Well, our constitutional courts have a role, which is this. Now, let's take the science of Ayurveda. Let's take a state government that hates Ayurveda so much so that they'll say, we are making a law to we are making a law to say that this will no longer be permissible. If they were to make a law like that, then whoever was practicing Ayurveda could go to the court and say, I have a constitutional right to practice a profession of my choice. I have a constitutional right to practice a trade of my choice, so on and so forth. The government has made this law. This law is illegal, so kindly strike down this law. Now, it is possible for a person to go to a court of law and make that argument, because the Constitution itself provides you with that right. It says all citizens, remember, all citizens have a right to practice a profession, trade, occupation or business of their choice. And if the government makes a law imposing unreasonable restriction on it, then the courts may intervene and strike down the extent of unreasonableness in that law. Now that's given under the Constitution. So the question becomes, what do alcohol companies do, liquor companies do, what do tobacco companies do when they find that the government is doing something? Now the tobacco companies were not happy with 85%, right? So what did they say? They went to the courts and they said, this is infringing on my right to carry on my business, which is selling cigarette packets, products and all that. In this regard, our courts have made a judicial innovation. Now what is that judicial innovation? It's known as res extra commercium. Res extra commercium is, it's a Latin word. Essentially, it means not the object of commerce. And our Supreme Court introduced it in 1957. And, gambling, the profession of gambling and betting was sought to be, prohibited or regulated at that point of time. That's when a gambling house went to the court and said, well, I have a constitutional right to indulge in the business of gambling, and the government can impose only a reasonable restriction, but it is not doing so. It is imposing an unreasonable restriction. At which point the Supreme Court said, look, what we will do is this. If there is an object that is inherently harmful to the society, then we will let the government be the best judge on what extent of regulation is necessary to manage that evil. We will not second guess. We will therefore keep such objects out of our purview. So we are not going to examine the reasonableness or unreasonableness of a law when we consider an activity to be res extra commercium. So gambling was considered to be res extra commercium in this decision, but then the principle also became a major factor. The courts, or in this very judgment, the court evolved this principle and said, because the court was mindful of the possibility of more activities coming to the court. Prostitution. I'm sure if there is a law made to prohibit prostitution, a person who had previously indulged in it might as well go to the court and say, what is wrong with this? Why is the government making it a crime, to indulge in prostitution, so on and so forth? Now, our courts felt that if people come to us with these kinds of arguments, we would not be in a position to, entertain those arguments, because how do we decide what is reasonable, what is unreasonable, when society deems that activity to be so immoral, so evil to public health? I mean, immoral or evil to a public health. So that's why they said, no, we will treat it as res extra commercium. And then you see, Lotteries, liquor again. Now, liquor is not as bad as nicotine, from what data were to show, but liquor is already treated as res extra commercium, and we are currently in the process of forcing the courts to treat tobacco as res extra commercium. And I can tell you, I will perhaps, if next year, if IPH were to invite me again, I will be back next year to tell you that we've been successful in getting courts to treat tobacco as res extra commercium. Because we've made great effort in that direction. When I say we, I mean huge number of people, activists, lawyers, and doctors. So we want tobacco also to be treated as res extra commercium. And look at it, liquor. Now, I'll give you this personal instance. Last year, 2017, November 8th, 9th, 10th, there was an Indian Cancer Congress. There was something like that, some event, symposium or something, in Clark's Hotel, Bangalore. That's close to the Devnalli airport. November 8th, 9th, 10th, those 3 days. And I went in to the day one. I just wanted to become more aware of all these things. The night before that, on the 7th of November, the American Society of Clinical Oncologists came out with a bulletin that said, enough is enough with alcohol. Alcohol was implicated in 5.5% of all new cases of cancer and 5.8% of all cancer-related deaths in a year. Now, that's a very benign number when you compare with the kind of cancers that are attributed to tobacco. Smoking. In India, almost 45% of some cancers in men are attributed to tobacco. So if liquor in our country has already been treated as res extra commercium, we are more than confident, we can practically bet with anybody that nicotine or tobacco will be automatically added because it's a bigger carcinogen. And I mean, for the legally oriented people, this is the explanation. Somebody might ask, does it mean that the government can arbitrarily decide on things to be res extra commercium and then do whatever it wants? Can't it start exploiting those industries? Can't it start blackmailing them? No, not at all. Because this would be the yardstick. You see, judges have to also see the product, see the nature of the product, and consider the harm the product causes to the society, and then they must say, this is unworthy of judicial indulgence only under that. Okay. This means what a legislature must do, a DC can't do. A DC can't say, your product is Rex Extra Commercium, though I don't have the authority to block it, I will block it. If he were to do that, he will be snapped. He will be unsuccessful in court. So nobody should assume that merely because courts see something as Res Extra Commercium, governments are free to do whatever they want. It's not so. Because that would be a kind of anarchy. That's not what we are advocating. And this is it. Again, this is for the legally minded. So there is a time that's running on this. This is the time that since I started speaking. Is it? Okay. Okay, so this is the last and final slide. I am confident actually that we will get rid of tobacco in less than 2 years. I mean 1 year I would say. Though IPH sitting here may not agree, because I had promised them in their other case that we will get it done instantly. It's been 3 months, but the fault is unfortunately not ours. The fault is with our courts. In what? It's not like anybody heard us and that we were not able to deliver what we had promised. The problem is nobody even heard us. It is such a mess at a particular court. The matter never came up for hearing. And still, unfortunately, we tried our best to get it to a hearing, and now more judges have come, and effective Monday we will have more judges sitting on that matter. So, but however, this will be different. I don't think I can, say, I can think of any reason why we will be not successful. We are doing everything at this point of time. And I'm quite hopeful that we will be successful. Is there any argument any of you can muster to keep tobacco within society? Because we are done, this will be more like interaction. Can any of you, let's say intellectually also, is there any argument that any of you can muster, can think of, conjure, to keep tobacco within the society? No. You can't. Yes, sir.